John Constantine movie notes, as he's going to be contributing to the larger scale investment into the production for Keanu Reeves from the obstructed contracts under the discoverable records released in the secret courts should continue according to the original valuations from the market, which is derived by the acknowledgement of the PSYOP obstructions, creating a difference in said charts or evaluations for public consumption in order to sell the fraudulent narratives. As a strategy of war against the Republic by the systematic use of criminal excessive terrorist force by the KKK as Confederate militia overthrowing the United States, seeking said obstructions. At which point you would have the types at some point, as possibly a flashback in the meme thinking Harley Quinn in her first engagement with Tiger's character, which, under the trafficking of Tiger, engages in the acknowledgement that she, being restrained or coerced or manipulated by society or her group, or the threats from various angles and illusions emplaced by the PsyOps mechanism for the secret courts, sees Tiger and is addressing her original desire without the acknowledgement of the original relationship in question, at which point their original relationship generating value in Tiger's favor was not validated on her side as a strategy in order to have captured Tiger and kept him inside of the cage, at which point the position that she would have been presented for the cover story of her doing some kind of charity or good social work by showing up and exchanging with the Tiger would be subverted by its base evaluation of their free society relationship, where they would have originally known each other, and the evaluation of them knowing each other under the original power dynamics and structures, which those trafficking her would not acknowledge nor allow her to acknowledge under the coercion in order to process the resources for shit, at which point the objective in reality is to compel the fraudulent narrative in order to create a series of harassments and rudeness, which are not specifically the fault of Harley. They are the fault of the ones feeding her the shit, which annoys the Tiger as the shit is not tolerable and is disgusting, at which point the revulsion from Tiger is negatively impacted as a reaction from Harley, who is presented as having to be a positive value, getting a negative reaction, at which point the process is that she's being used in order to offend the Tiger, which she actively is trying to engage in the mind game for power dynamics and other things, including the coercion of the threat that they would not be allowed to associate if they are compelled to acknowledge the original relationship, which is systematically compounded by the harassment and haranguing of the of the others, including the hyenas, which are actively engaged in the excessive force or bullying or abuse and harassment of the caged tiger, which is unable to do anything while restrained inside of the cage, generating a perpetual abuse cycle, which, presented as the advantage or present in question, is actually just like a Christmas present that they're not allowed to open with negative consequence. And it's similar to in North Korea when they were having the United States was having a war with North Korea, and they took torture victims, captured POWs from the United States under North Korea, and they created physical torture abuses which have permanent scars on the victim, and then they put a Christmas sweater on him, and they put him in front of a tree, and they showed him in the pictures opening presents which don't actually have anything inside of them. At which point the equivalent masked over is the acknowledgement that the present is real, and they're obstructing the real charts for the false narrative, at which point they're demonstrating the illusion while refusing to allow the return of the original assets, which were already the property of the tiger, that they were seeking to present as having a nice Christmas morning opening presents, which he isn't allowed to open, creating a series of false conversations, which generate as the strategy in the skirmishes in order to fight for the supremacy of the false narrative, replacing the real scenario in its correct due diligence. Under the obstructions, the original valuation from the charts demonstrated that many people had discovered extreme values in trading on the title of tiger, and thus there is lots of talent and agents supporting him under the structure of the original values traded. So accountants and lawyers generates an entire network under the mere idea of the tiger as the primary star of the main show from his structure, at which point the extreme luxuries is derived by the original wealth, which is being stolen, and actively destroyed most of the wealth by the capture of tiger in question, which generates his capture and the demonstration of the defamation of tiger as the alternative shows traded on the black market, which Harley would have been sent to in order to do their due diligence for the mob's crime money under their normal trades on the black market, generating the position of tiger exchanging with Harley under their compulsion of trying to get her to unwrap the present, generating the mutual acknowledgement of first principles in order to assert the original valuation. And that original valuation demonstrating that she isn't doing something special or unique, but because their original charts demonstrate their mutual cooperation inside the show, generating her position of wanting whatever it is she wanted inside the fantasy, which would have originally been provided by the network of the tiger, generating their original relationship, at which point the margins between the shown value in the hidden charts and the thing that's being communicated in order to justify the legitimacy of the abusers is the intended damages by the calculation, generating the shit out of the whole exchange, which is the thing offending the tiger in question. At which point you have the systems which mutually have to be understood as the collaborating value from the original network from tiger is having to be replaced by the mob function. Now the mob function has all kinds of, as a criminal organization, criminal extortions. And those criminal extortion rackets, including the rape culture, which had been pervasive throughout those systems, as the selling and distributing of crimes such as rape is derived by the coercion of the overarching structure. At which point the absence of tiger is generating the rape culture, which is one of the things that Harley complains about, generating the general damages which suffer through the money laundering of the absence of the tiger. At which point you have lots of these types of examples of those complaining about The various injuries of the mob caused by David's absence, which are used as an excuse for the trade with the mob to exchange lip service without substance in exchange for the continuation of all of the offenses, at which points they're given the pat on the head, metaphorically, and told to deal with it under the false celebration and promotions, generating a Feminists Incorporate, which is specifically designed to do the mob's work in order to conduct the restraints of the political identity of women in total, at which point these structures generating the rape culture are actively promoted by those pretending to represent women, which requires women to cooperate with backing the Feminists Incorporated in order to get screwed over by the con job of their criminal exchanges. So many of the original contracts have to be validated, or the market would retaliate against the mob and the mob would lose everything. So the mob has to acknowledge the original contracts from Tiger in order to not get the retaliation in question, at which points the original value from Tiger is the acknowledged placeholder, which generates the mirrored economy from the defamation injury by the absence of the core mechanic that would have been keeping the market in place. At which point the system generates those that they're promoting that would not have normally had their original advantages, seeking the profits from crime of their various resources, which is reinforced by the absence of the original contracts to prevent the retaliation of the subjects. At which point you have a system in place where the absence of the solution of the original market creates the reinforcement of the structure for the mob's black market, generating their perpetual criminal circuits defended by the Feminists Incorporated, which is generating their criminal injuries for their advancements of non-substantive profits, which generates the traps for themselves and the rest of their political identities. So part 2 on notes concerning the John Constantine concept. Once you've dealt with the function of Harley's sub-story, you have the activity of John fighting the Frezugul and other devils, generating the subversion of the deal with the devils, which were conducted by the government and the mobs under the position of active acceleration, generating the position where the government is making the deals with the devil in order to increase its exponential power as a national security function, and the deals with the devil similar to the gain of function activities generates the collaboration with the other units which have made deals with the devil, allowing for the devils to broker each other's resources in order to satisfy the larger interests with the government. At which point, John's fight with the devils is a fight over the soul of the country, not just the local ramifications. At which point, you have the system of every aspect of the government and its connections locally and foreign in order to create the larger objective for the devils, at which point the devils are using the government and their subordinate positions in order to create their devil society, which provides the powers to the government they specifically asked for under the monkey's paw wish, which is corrupting the government systems, which creates a wizard cult amongst their intelligence apparatus, which are systematically reproducing the devil's historic previous societies, which is normalizing the existence of their powers in order to assert their larger cosmic goals, which they're using the peasant people in order to sucker into giving it to them, while the suckers are asking for the advancement in power. The advancement in power is the structure of the devils at the cosmic destruction of their enemies, which is pro-human. And the wizards' rebellion generates their assertion of an alternative government. So their wizard society, dressed up in their classic robes, in the function of systematically planning on how to overthrow the American government in that world, generates their location of their preferred states of sin, which have already been used as a leverage point in order to have engaged in deals with those devils. At which point, these positions are the assimilation of those devils' power, using the structure of the people, gaining the power in order to initiate the second federal government as a platform to overthrow that republic, and then to use it as a base of operations in their continued civil war, overthrowing the rest of the states connected to that particular compromised location. At which point you have in all locations your insurgency, and you have your genuine members of the public. And the accusation, which they are actively trying to muddy up in the illusion, is to make the aggression for retaliation against the damages against the general public when the insurgents are the problem, at which point you have the perpetual misunderstanding as a strategy in the overthrowing of that state by the wasting of resources in retaliation against the wrong targets, which is going to have to make everyone subconsciously, individually, as a collective organization and as individuals inside that society, to be able to collectively rely on the original law and order from the investigations, generating the original market, forfeiting the advantages of the devil's market for the communist centrally planned wizard economy, which has given them their criminal profits and the injuries as a natural byproduct, which are underplayed as they are the intended victim. They are designed to complain about it, so the propaganda would be the suppression of those who would complain about the injury of them being the victim of the con. At which point you have the highly compromised devil society, such as those making the deals with the devils at the very top, such as those asserting their positions in the highest levels of government, which includes the federal judges, which are actively using the cover of trying to push the precedents of not being able to get a remedy to a secret as is derived by the wizard cult's magic system, as a function of the wizard society, would not be endorsed by those who support the wizards against the overthrow of the republics in question. At which point the strategy of war of insurgents, using their place inside the system in order to systematically corrupt and destroy everything within inside the organizations, generates the primary mechanism of the story, relating to how the general public are supposed to solve the threat of the coup by the Satanist society, which would be engaged in active reproduction of the human sacrifice arrangement. And while they don't necessarily need the human sacrifice to be blood sacrifice, the human sacrifice, such as slave raids and false incarceration in order to make the sales and distribution of humans guilty of nothing in order to work under their faculties and structures generating those systems, allows the replacement of the classic devil trope for the new age devil trope, relevant to the narrative, as the system of blood worship is a later stage, as the current stage is their attempts to acquire the control by infection, generating the position of having conducted their values not directly to the devil, but to cost of work. And the cost of doing business to the devils being an active aspect of the calculation must be given its own screen time and attention, which I haven't quite at the moment provided in its full due diligences, but there are lots of schemes to draw from. Now, the normalizing of the slave raids are on the basis of the learned elders of Zion, which is a trap in order to get the precedent of killing the Jews from the Jew by getting them to accept the precedents that can be used against them at a future date. Requires their permission to normalize before the injuries can be informed, which generates the high power members of the Jewish community who are making deals with the devil, who are connecting themselves with those who would implement the enforcement of the devil's will. So the highest Jews under the devils are actively connected to those who are anti-Semitic and are seeking the greater powers in order to engage in the eradications, which is the structure provided by the devils in order to satisfy the wish granted from those who sold their soul. The false flag of the wizard societies generates an intention to create violence as a reaction to their crimes, or the image of violence as a retaliation, justifying the consolidation of the greater government powers in defense against the use of violence, at which point the false justification in order to challenge law enforcement conducted by individuals functioning under the Second Amendment to do a ipso facto deputization of law enforcement functions from the private sector as a general reaction to the criminal actions without having the specific orders in question of the normal functions of government, do not have the specific order in question in order to have the original legitimacy of certifications, nor the original value of discipline, as they are a rickshaw militia in all cases, because the core definition of them not having been a trained group aren't engaged in specific strategic goals as if they had been trained by government to do the law enforcement in question against the insurgents. Now, the use of violence being specifically justified but arbitrary generates the negative consequences of having an unprofessional force, generating the need to remove the threat to the public while at the same time not having the specific materials in question in order to do so in a competent and acceptable fashion, which is constantly used by the insurgents engaged in the devil worship. Jay, using both of these engagements, is creating chaos for the sake of chaos, and while Harley Quinn is chaotic good, Jay is chaotic evil. Engaging in these systems still require his engagement to try John Constantine's style of tricking the devils while actually not being subject to any of the negative consequences by the devils, who have to figure out that they're tricked too late, as the Joker's position as absolute chaotic evil cannot subjugate himself, but will only use the force of evil in order to increase the ambitions of evil under his chaos, at which point he's more loyal to chaos, and that subjugation of evil is a means to an end which he intends on dismantling at a future date. In the meantime, he had constructed his positions from compromising positions of expert studies in law, generating his position as a lawyer in order to use the government in order to push the false morality learned elders of Zion mechanism to engage in a structure of Mad Libs to arbitrarily create a moral in question which is to be enforced by the government in the assertion of the government established religion without the acknowledgement of it being a religion, but it is in function a superior entity giving rewards and punishments on the basis of morality outside of otherwise accepted norms and law, by the advantage of using customs of great authority, and the function of customs of great authority that, being opposed to base reason, are fraud, and thus increase his fundamental interest as a breeder of chaos. And his plan in breeding chaos includes his deal with the devil Jubilix, which has the active ambition of pushing socialism, which allows everyone to become equally poor on maturity by the use of expressly extorting the weaknesses in each structure, which looks good as he's engaged in the double talk functions of the normal monkey paw wish, which allows those who are accepting it to receive everything that they asked for and realize too late that it isn't what they wanted at all.
At which point you have the use of Joker's application of those religious functions, which have the extreme irony of subverting the specific moral in question, at which point you have the use of the refusal to respect discovery in order to substantively change the story on the basis of having conducted that particular manipulation. In which case, if your moral is not stealing, then the actual enforcement of the mechanism guarantees the exponential increase of alternative thefts in favor of the KKK militia functions, at which point you have these systems specifically for extreme irony by the use and application of obstruction of justice as the discovery of evidence of what is really behind everything would be the end of the racket, at which point the perpetual structure of the racket in question requires it to be protected from law, and thus there cannot be a remedy to a secret without destroying the crime.